You have 5 days to decide, Cassandra said, her voice sharp but eerily casual. Accept the new salary package, effective immediately, or submit your resignation. I blinked. Once. The room was too quiet. The fluorescent light above flickered slightly, casting a sterile blue glow over the HR conference table. Cassandra sat with her back straight, perfectly still in her tailored blazer, like a statue of corporate indifference. To her right, the CFO stared blankly at a folder, as if reading numbers could somehow justify what they were doing. I looked at the paper she slid across the table. My new salary, 42% of what I'd been earning last Friday. A cut so deep it felt personal. You understand this isn't about performance, Cassandra added quickly, sensing my silence. It's a company-wide restructuring initiative targeting roles that no longer require a full-time executive compensation. Roles. Like mine. 12 years. Gone with the stroke of a pen. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was hollow, like someone had unplugged me. I see, I finally said, my voice calm, too calm. I slid the paper back across the table. Then I asked, out of curiosity, who'll be signing the safety certificate for Juno Line 6 next Thursday? Cassandra blinked. So did the CFO. A beat of silence. Cassandra cleared her throat. Well, we're looking into that. It's something we can reassign. I nodded. Slowly. Of course. Then I smiled. Not a big smile, not a happy one, just a small, unreadable curve of the lips. It was enough to make Cassandra glance at the CFO with that subtle, nervous twitch people have when they suddenly realize they've missed something. I didn't explain. I didn't push. I didn't threaten. I stood, gathered my notebook, and walked out of the room without another word. Behind me, I heard the soft sound of a pen clicking, but it wasn't mine. They had no idea. And I wasn't about to tell them. Not yet. Back at my cubicle, the fluorescent hum sounded different, as though it recognized the insult I had just swallowed. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but all I could type were memories, 12 years of them, spooling out inside my head like silent film. I remember the first day, a rented warehouse on the edge of Wichita. The ceiling dripping condensation onto half-finished drone frames. Venturnus wasn't Venturnus then. It was 3 founders. A dog-eared loan agreement. And me, the 20-something safety nerd who knew how to navigate OSHA forms better than Microsoft Excel. I taped hazard lines, labeled chemicals, and convinced a skeptical fire marshal to grant a temporary operating permit so we could ship our very first order. No press release ever mentioned the girl with the clipboard who kept the lights on. Year 4. An arc welder malfunctioned and sprayed sparks across a pallet of lithium batteries. I hit the kill switch, dragged a hose, and filed the incident report before the smoke cleared. The state investigator said my quick response had prevented a full facility shutdown. Corporate translated that into a brief sentence in the annual report. Operations continued without interruption, showcasing our resilient culture. My name never appeared. Year 7. Growth exploded. We left the warehouse for a gleaming campus, and every ribbon-cutting photograph featured the usual smiling suits. I was always in the back, orange hard hat tilted just out of frame, making sure the dignitaries stayed behind the yellow line. My mom kept a clipping on her fridge anyway. She circled an elbow she swore belonged to me. By year 10, the company valuation crossed $1 billion. They flew journalists in, served champagne in the lobby, and installed a sculpture titled Collective Vision. I stood under that frozen swirl of aluminum and glass, wondering why Collective Vision never seemed to have a seat reserved for compliance. And now, year 12, HR tells me I'm too expensive. A low pulse of anger throbbed beneath the hurt, but I pressed it down. Pride is quieter than rage. and far more patient. I opened the master insurance file on my screen, a labyrinth of endorsements, waivers, and renewal riders that only I truly understood. At the bottom of the active policy, above a bold stamp that read "In Force," sat a single digital signature, mine. No alternates, no backups, no auto-generated facsimile. Legal had insisted on that exclusivity after the welder fire because underwriters trusted one accountable name over any committee. I leaned back, letting the discovery steady me like a hand on the shoulder. They had reduced my worth to a number, yet every machine still whirred under the protection of my name. That irony tasted bittersweet, but also empowering. I glanced at the hallway leading to Cassandra's office, then clicked the file shut. They could erase me from tomorrow's payroll, but they couldn't run a single press without my signature today. My quiet revenge had started long before the meeting. They just hadn't noticed the fuse was already lit. The next morning, I knocked lightly on Cassandra's glass office door. She didn't look up, just gestured with a flick of her manicured hand for me to enter. Her desk was spotless, sterile, like she'd moved in yesterday and still hadn't unpacked anything meaningful. I stood for a moment, unsure whether to speak or wait. "I've got 2 minutes. Scalar?" she said without looking away from her screen. "What's up?" I stepped forward, carefully placing a printed summary of our current insurance status on her desk. I wanted to talk through the implications of the policy shift, especially regarding the compliance signature, I said. The underwriter requires continuity. If my credentials are deactivated without a replacement approved by the board, our coverage— She cut me off with a short laugh. "This again?" My jaw tensed. "It's not a small thing. Cassandra, you can't just plug in a name and expect the system to—" "Scalar," she said flatly, finally meeting my eyes. "You're part of an older structure, paper files, legacy systems. The way we do things now is different. I need people who understand AI-based tracking, not manual audit trails." I stared at her, trying to absorb the audacity of it all. "I know you've been here a long time," she added, her tone laced with condescension. "And that's admirable, really. But let's be honest. This company has grown past needing people who file forms by hand. Forms by hand? She had no idea what I did. None. And yet she had made a 6-figure decision about my worth without asking a single question about the legal frameworks I managed, the digital credentials I maintained, or the certifications I had to retake every year just to keep our plants compliant. I swallowed the rising burn in my chest and kept my voice level. "You do understand that without a valid safety certification signed by an accredited officer, the Juno line can't operate legally past Thursday?" Cassandra arched one brow, uninterested. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm sure someone in operations can fill in." I didn't respond, not out loud, but inside. A sharp switch flipped as I turned to leave. I glanced at the calendar pinned on her wall, a sleek, corporate design marked only with high-level project names. In the corner of this week's grid, I saw the one detail that sealed it all. Policy renewal, June 13th. That was 4 days away. She didn't realize it yet. But she just told me exactly how much time I had to let the system collapse under her watch. I walked out of her office not defeated, but burning. Not angry like a flare, but steady like a fuse. She thought she'd buried me. She didn't know I was holding the matches. Leaving Cassandra's office, I walked past the posters, my pulse strangely steady. Anger had cooled into something sharper, colder, more precise. By the time I reached my workstation, I was no longer the woman begging for recognition. I was a surgeon preparing for a clean incision. First, I closed every irrelevant window on my screen and launched the Federal Industrial Liability Portal, a site so labyrinthine most executives never learned its address. My credentials appeared in green, the system greeting me with the respect machines reserved for the people who programmed them. 2 clicks brought me to the certification roster. There it was, My encrypted signature stamped across 29 active policies, each worth more than our last corporate award ceremony. I hovered the cursor for half a breath, then selected Revoke Authorization. A confirmation dialog asked if I was certain. I typed yes, the letters looking almost ceremonial on the gray backdrop. Another dialog warned me that revocation was irreversible without board approval. That suited me fine. I entered my biometric PIN, pressed Submit, and watched the screen bloom red. Signature invalidated. Effective immediately. No alarm sounded in the office, no flashing lights, just a silent cascade of database updates that would ripple outward like pressure waves from a depth charge. Step 2 required evidence. I generated the full activity log, printed it to a secure PDF, and routed the file to the little laser printer by the back wall, while the pages slid out, warm and faintly smelling of toner. I drafted a short email to my attorney, Rebecca Singh. Rebecca, attached is the audit record showing lawful revocation of my compliance authority at Venturis Aerospace. Please file under contingency folder Juno. S. I attached the PDF, clicked send, and felt a decisive click inside my chest, as though the pieces of a puzzle had finally locked. While the email traveled, the portal refreshed itself. A yellow banner now stretched across the top. Emergency notice generated for underwriter review. I smiled, not the tense, cryptic smile I'd given Cassandra, but a private, satisfied curve. The system, by design, alerted the insurer before notifying the insured. Regulators wanted carriers to act instantly, forcing companies to prove compliance rather than hide infractions. Cassandra would learn about her bridge soon enough, framed as a formal demand. I gathered the warm stack of pages, slipped them into a plain manila envelope, and placed the envelope inside my tote. No one looked up. An office lives on the assumption that the quiet people are harmless. Exiting the building, I felt Kansas wind cut across the parking lot, fresh, bracing. The fuse was burning invisibly now, buried under spreadsheets and hubris, and I alone knew how soon it would reach the powder. When it did, no memo, chatbot, or HR algorithm would be fast enough to smother the sudden blast. Monday came like any other, with coffee pots sputtering in the break room and the low hum of forklifts echoing from the factory bay below. No one mentioned the meeting I'd had with Cassandra. No one asked how I was doing. It was as if the whole office had quietly agreed that I was either irrelevant or already gone. HR had clearly assumed I'd taken the hint, accept the pay cut in silence or slink away with my pride. They didn't realize I'd chosen a third route, a silent one, a ticking one. I sat at my desk, calmly reviewing an outdated safety checklist from one of the satellite facilities. The inbox kept pinging with mundane requests, quarterly recertification reminders, minor update logs, a memo about the annual fire drill, the superficial buzz of a company pretending everything was stable. What they hadn't noticed, what no one had even thought to check, was that the entire compliance framework was already under silent review. Mine. Cassandra passed by around 10:30, offering a tight, insincere smile. "Glad to see you're still with us," she said, voice syrupy. "Just wrapping things up," I replied. "Evenly." She nodded, not realizing what I meant by wrapping up. To her, I probably looked like someone coming to terms with defeat. In reality, I was watching the minutes crawl forward like detonator wires inching toward a charge. My calendar said, "Final internal report, line 6. It had been due the week before, but I had delayed submission under the pretense of re-verification. No one followed up. That was the report, the last barrier holding the system's automated safety flag in check. I opened the file. It was clean, accurate, ready to go. All I had to do was click submit. But instead, I selected the drop-down menu and chose Withdraw Draft. Another dialog popped up. Withdrawing will trigger auto-escalation review in 48 hours. Continue? I clicked yes. The system logged the action, quietly, no alerts, no drama. But in 2 days, the compliance engine would begin crawling through dependencies, and when it discovered a missing Line 6 report, the entire plant's liability status would be bumped to pre-suspension. Automatically, I leaned back in my chair and watched a group of junior analysts laughing near the water cooler. They had no idea the floor beneath them was shifting. By noon, production orders were still humming. Trucks were backing up to the loading docks. Supervisors were calling in lunch orders. The building moved with the confidence of people who had never felt the moment before impact. I closed the dashboard and folded my hands in my lap. Let them have their calm. Storms always feel furthest away right before the sky breaks open. The week crawled forward on quiet wheels, but I could feel the gears stripping underneath. By Friday afternoon, the hallway chatter had thinned. Managers ducked into offices, clutching printouts they didn't fully understand. Someone from legal whispered about an unexpected audit ping, then shrugged it off when cafeteria coffee called. I stayed invisible, finishing my final desk sweep as if preparing for spring cleaning, not demolition. At 5:05 that evening, my phone vibrated with a push alert. Pre-suspension status escalated to carrier review. The message contained a code only compliance officers, or former ones, could decode. Translation: the insurer's algorithm had flagged us for imminent cancellation, pending human confirmation at dawn. I slept better that night than I had in months. Saturday, 6:30 in the morning, Kansas time. A hard ping from my inbox woke me. Subject line: Notice of coverage termination. Effective immediately. 8 legally dense pages explained that, due to unresolved certification gaps and the absence of an authorized signatory, all liability policies for Venturnus Aerospace were hereby rendered null. The plant could not legally operate machinery, load trucks, or power production lines without criminal exposure. I poured coffee, opened the plant's public webcam feed, and watched events unfold in real time. Red warning banners flashed across every workstation. Conveyor belts slowed, then stopped. Forklifts idled mid-aisle. A pallet of carbon fiber sheets hung suspended from one driver's fork, as if frozen mid-sentence. Within minutes, the factory floor resembled a diorama, busy figures trapped behind glass. My phone rang twice, an unlisted number from the CFO's desk, then went silent. I let it. Instead, I drafted a new email, no greeting, no explanation. Subject: Option 3 activated. S. I addressed it solely to Cassandra, then pressed send. I imagined her seated at the same pristine desk, opening that 7-word message while alarms proliferated across her dashboard. The woman who'd told me I was past my prime was now staring at the cost of undervaluing the only person who could silence those alarms. I showered, dressed, and drove into town for breakfast. While I ate eggs over easy, group texts from former coworkers flooded my phone. Do you know what's happening? And plants down. Insurance yanked. Did you quit? I answered none of them. Some storms must speak for themselves. Finishing my coffee, I folded the termination notice into my notebook. The first domino had fallen. More would follow. And when they begged for someone to pick up the pieces, they would discover the shelf was already empty. I locked the notebook, slipped it into my bag, and stepped outside. The morning air smelled like cut grass and possibility. Somewhere behind those distant walls, people were scrambling for answers. I had already drafted mine. Option 3 was live. And the next move, if they were smart, belonged to them, not to me. Monday dawned strangely quiet, as if the factory's sudden silence had seeped into the corridors of the corporate offices. I arrived early, slipped through security without a badge swipe, it had already been deactivated and headed straight for my cubicle. The cardboard box in my hands felt heavier than its contents. A framed photo of my mother, 3 well-worn safety manuals, and the mug that had survived 12 moves and 2 near fires. I did not linger, one by one. I pulled the thumbtacks from my corkboard, folded presentation printouts, and powered down the monitor that still flashed red compliance errors no one understood. Colleagues drifted past, offering sympathetic nods, yet avoiding eye contact, afraid my misfortune might be contagious. When Cassandra's stiletto heels clicked by, she paused just long enough for a victorious half-smile. In her mind, the problem had solved itself. The dinosaur had accepted extinction. At 10:01 a.m. HR circulated an all-staff email. We regret to announce that Scalar Monroe has chosen to resign due to recent organizational pressures. We thank her for her service and wish her success. The wording painted me as fragile, incapable of weathering change. My phone buzzed instantly with condolence emojis, job board links, and a single line from an old engineer friend. They never deserved you anyway. I typed no replies. By lunchtime, I was gone. Cardboard box buckled on the passenger seat of my aging sedan. I drove to the credit union, withdrew the small cushion I'd been saving, and winced at the remaining balance. 12 years of loyalty reduced to 3 paychecks, and a severance package still trapped in limbo. The teller, a woman with kind eyes, asked if I needed assistance setting up overdraft protection. I told her I would be fine, though the tremor in my voice almost convinced me otherwise. That evening, over reheated noodles, I opened my brokerage app. Venturna's stock had plummeted 32% since the shutdown notice. Employee forums overflowed with panic. I scrolled through listing after listing of restricted shares, engineers, line managers, even a VP, dumping equity at whatever price the market would take. Fear is a liquid asset, and tonight it was on fire sale. I transferred the last of my savings, then leveraged a modest credit line Rebecca had helped me secure months earlier, for emergencies. In the next hour, I placed dozens of quiet buy orders, small enough to avoid drawing attention. Time to execute at incremental lows. My screen filled with green confirmations. Filled. 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 Each purchase slipped another sliver of ownership into my pocket. By midnight, my cash reserves were a memory. Yet my voting power, on paper, had doubled. To the world, I looked like a laid-off specialist nursing wounded pride. Inside, I was quietly gathering stones for the slingshot. The company could label my departure however it pleased. Soon enough, they would learn who actually walked away with the leverage. And leverage, once loaded, only needs the right moment to release its weight. I intended to choose that moment, on my terms alone, 7 business days after HR circulated my obituary. The corporate lawyer, Martin Klein, partner at Boyd and Avery, called at 8:15 a.m. with a tone that sounded suspiciously like begging. The insurer had refused to reinstate coverage without my signature. Regulators were circling, and 2 clients had already threatened breach of contract lawsuits. Martin offered a 1-page retainer, naming me independent compliance consultant of record. The compensation, triple my former salary, wired weekly, wasn't a negotiation, it was a lifeline. I told him I would consider it once I reviewed the board, minutes, and the current share register. He hesitated, then agreed. Power had shifted. I arrived Thursday wearing the same navy blazer they'd once deemed too formal for back-office staff. Security escorted me past reception with the reverence normally given to auditors from the SEC. Cassandra was nowhere in sight. Rumor placed her in marathon meetings with outside PR. Rewriting the story of the shutdown. In the executive conference room, Martin slid the contract across polished walnut, eyes tracking my every micro-reaction. I signed with a blue gel pen, Tiny rebellions matter. Then pulled a second folder from my briefcase. Proof of beneficial ownership totaling 34.07% of outstanding voting shares. Acquired legally under Rule 144. Silence struck the room like a dropped wrench. "Is this accurate?" Martin whispered. "Cross-checked twice," I said, "which means I'm now the largest single shareholder, and as consultant, I'm entitled to attend strategic sessions." The color drained from his face, but professionalism kept him upright. He motioned for an assistant to summon the interim board. Within 30 minutes, 6 directors filed in, expressions chiseled by panic and caffeine. I remained seated, letting them take the psychological lower ground. When introductions finished, I thanked them for the generous contracting terms and tabled my first motion: the immediate removal of Cassandra Vale and CFO David Mercer for demonstrated gross negligence. The vote was scheduled for the next morning because corporate bylaws require 24 hours notice. I already had the numbers. Yet the meeting's real victory wasn't the upcoming purge. It was the unspoken acknowledgement that the woman they'd tried to shrink had just redrawn the organizational chart from a single chair. As the directors shuffled out, Martin lingered, eyes darting between the contract and my share ledger, finally understanding the game he'd helped set. I closed my notebook softly, offered him a courteous nod, and walked toward the glass doors where the reflection of a very different scalar waited to greet me, and where the decisive vote of 9:30 a.m. tomorrow loomed like a sunrise no one could halt. Outside, the late spring wind carried dust across the parking lot, whispering that power, once claimed, demands its own brand of dawn tomorrow here too. The boardroom felt like a muted courtroom when I walked in at 9:30 a.m. sharp. Sunlight blade thin across the conference table. Chairs squeaked, papers rustled, but every conversation stumbled to silence the moment I placed my ledger in front of the secretary. A week ago, these same directors barely remembered my surname. This morning, they waited for it to decide theirs. I opened the session with a calm breath. "Ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to Bylaw 12C, I move for immediate termination of Cassandra Vale, Head of Human Resources, and David Mercer, Chief Financial Officer, for gross negligence resulting in loss of insurance coverage, operational shutdown, and material share value destruction." Cassandra's face blanched. Mercer gripped his pen like a life vest. Director Halverson cleared his throat. "Trying for authority. Ms. Monroe, isn't this a bit precipitous? We can't dismiss 2 officers on a motion." "Agreed," I said, sliding copies of the insurer's cancellation letter across the table. "So, let's dismiss them on numbers." Page 2 listed projected liabilities, 8-figure fines, contract penalties, and 23 days of halted shipments, all traced to one missing certification. The directors studied the totals with the dread of men reading their own obituaries. Halverson gestured to the secretary. Ballots appeared: digital, anonymous, irrevocable, green for removal, red for retention. Fingers hovered, then one by one, green bloomed across the screen. 6 votes affirmative, 1 abstention. The motion carried with decisive force. I didn't smile. Victory tastes richer when savored in quiet. Cassandra tried to speak, but words tangled with shock. Security, already summoned by Martin, stepped inside. Mercer's gaze darted to me, searching for mercy. I offered a polite nod, the same courtesy he'd shown while cutting 58% from my life. As they were escorted out, I tapped the projector. One final housekeeping item. The master ESOP registry flashed on screen. Next to the line labeled Beneficial Owner, Class B voting shares appeared a fresh signature. Scalar L. Monroe. My accumulation of fire sale equity had cleared compliance overnight. Officially recorded. Gasps rippled like a dropped stack of coins. Outside, distant sirens hinted at fresh audits already swirling toward Venturnis headquarters. Moving forward, I said, voice level. I'll serve as interim vice chair while continuing compliance remediation. Our first objective is restoring insurance within 72 hours. Second, rebuilding employee trust. No one objected. The gavel, Halverson's, not mine, struck once, adjourning a meeting that had rewritten the company's spine in under 30 minutes. In the hallway, the carpet felt softer, as though the building itself recognized new gravity. I paused at a window, watching wind turbines beyond the parking lot turn with patient inevitability. Power, I remembered, isn't seized by shouting. It's gathered, quietly, until one nod is enough to tilt the axis. 7 days after the vote, I found a better use for victory. I filed articles of incorporation for the 58 Fund, a grant designed for women over 40 who've been told they cost too much. Initial capital came from my triple-rate consulting checks, plus a sliver of those bargain shares. The first award letter, signed at 9:20 a.m., went to a single mother finishing an industrial safety degree. Watching her eyes widen was worth every sleepless night. Next came rebuilding. I issued an open memo, Safety Division Reinstatement, immediate, by 8:30 a.m. Tuesday. The hallway buzzed with familiar faces Cassandra had discarded, badges reactivated, wages restored. They returned to the floor like veteran firefighters, dousing the chaos she'd left behind. Production metrics rose, morale shot even higher. Mid-week, a routine background packet landed in my compliance queue from Atlas Energy Components, one of our largest partners. The HR candidate's name stopped me cold. Cassandra Vale. Regulations required my approval. I checked not recommended and added my signature. Within minutes, Atlas replied, thanking me for safeguarding operational integrity. Some doors close softly, others slam with an echo. From the balcony outside my new office, I watched turbines spin against a clean sky. I realized revenge had been a waypoint, not a destination. True power is the freedom to redirect what once tried to break you into something that builds others. Your voice matters. 2. Have you battled back from a place where someone thought you were replaceable? Share your story in the comments. If this tale sparked courage, hit like, pass it to a friend who needs the boost, and tap subscribe for more true-to-life sagas of quiet defiance made loud. Every view fuels future stories. Every share empowers someone standing at the same crossroads. And every subscription tells the algorithm that these voices deserve daylight and oxygen. Now go write your own option 3.